Hey, what's up everybody? It is Kellen here from Start Your Systems, and welcome back to MXGP 3, the official motocross video game, where today we are playing the 2017 version, or I guess it'd be 16 probably, of Saint-Jean-d'Angely in France, and reviewing the 2019 MXGP of France, which happened at this very same racetrack. So, you know, the track looks maybe a little bit different than the one that they actually just raced over the weekend, but just went back to the nearest game that we have that has Saint-Jean in it, and gonna rip it up today with the man of the weekend. Well, I guess just like the man of the crowd for the weekend, Romain Febvre, the French hero, last world champion for France in 2015, making his return to racing back a week ago at Mantova. Or I should say at Agata in Portugal. The race has gone by so quick, I was already thinking, forgot about Agata in Portugal, but yeah, it's been a little bit since I did these recap videos. I wanted to get back to it today, just getting the ball rolling again this week after a lovely Memorial Day weekend here in the USA. And had a great time watching the GP this weekend, figuring out what's going on with these guys and how things have been in the series, since I've not been super attentive in the last couple weeks, but really sat down and watched this one, tried to dissect it, and we're going to bring you guys some of the recap right about meow. So, in the MXGP class, which I will start with, boy oh boy, do we have a championship shaping up now suddenly. Antonio Rowley had a pretty good championship lead established for a while there, and looked like he would probably keep that trend going this weekend. Didn't seem like there's anything amiss or awry, and led the first moto for a good portion there until Tim Geiser ran him down and caught him and passed him for the win. No big deal. Still has a pretty sizable championship lead. I think by this point in time he was up like 33 in the standings or something crazy, like big lead in the standings. Come to the second moto, and just kind of like in the USA with the second moto in the 250 class, we're now having a discussion upon discussions in the bench racing forums and so on and so forth about starting gates. For whatever reason, this was the weekend that starting gates decided malfunctioning would be the better option, and they'd been really having a tough time all day with the starting gate, it sounds like, so it wasn't just the second MXGP race, but it's where it caught everybody out the most, and particularly Antonio Rowley plowed the gate. There's a screenshot that at Pete Fox on Instagram, which is Pete Fox from Fox Racing. He screenshotted it and just basically said, "Does that look like the gate's falling evenly to you?" Which is interesting because his athlete Tim Geiser won the GP, and went 1-1 and closed down the points quite a bit, and I mean, I guess all is fair at the end of the day, and Pete doesn't necessarily have like a major role with Fox at the moment, but it's just kind of funny to say that like he was still showing some support for everybody that got affected negatively by the gate having a terrible dropping rate, even though his rider kind of benefited it from the most, almost, it seemed like. Anyway, Rowley's gate really didn't fall that fast. It was one of the slowest falling gates, and as with most pro motocrossers, they pretty much go on first flinch of the gate. And that caught a lot of guys out at Paula in the 250 class, but yeah, a lot of guys hit the gate. Monticelli like bounced off of it. I think it was Seward that actually got like the poor cell treatment where the gate bounced and kicked his rear end up, and he did a little kind of huckabuck thing off the gate. This is interesting. What have I done here? But Rowley fully hit the gate, had to back up, and came into the first corner dead last. Not the end of the world, because Rowley is a world-class rider. He should be able to charge to the field. 2 laps later, crashes in an uphill section that's kind of over a blind ridge, trying to get up. Ivo Monticelli runs into the back of him. They both go down again. So Rowley goes from charging all the way up. I think he was like 18th or so by that point, maybe even a little further. He made quite a few passes in the beginning of the race. And trying to charge forward, crash, gets ran over, basically, gets back up, and dead last again. Has to do it all again. Gets up to, I think he was up to 17th or 18th again. Then the bike stalls. He can't get it going for a while. Ends up down in 22nd. eventually, after all is said and done, and maybe one of the worst motos of Antonio Cairoli's career, he came home in 17th, picked up 4 points. But Geyser won the moto, and now the championship lead is down to just 10. So huge swing in points over the weekend. Cairoli was only able to pick up 26 points, whereas Geyser picked up a full 50. That's a 24-point swing. Again, you know, it was out above the 30 mark, somewhere in the 35, I think, 36 range going into France, and now leaving, it's suddenly a 10-point gap. So that's pretty big. It definitely is good for Geyser, showing that you know, he's able to win races when it counts, it seems like. And after a really tough round for him at Mantova, for Cairoli to follow it up here in France with a terrible moto. And maybe arguably the biggest storyline that's going into this now is reinforcements may be on the way in the form of Jeffrey Herlings. He is supposed to race the ADAC Masters Championship this coming weekend, and see where his fitness level is. He's been back on the bike for a couple weeks now, rehabbing from that foot injury in the off-season. And we all know Herlings can win motos, but when he originally comes back, he may not be ready to go to the very top and start winning races. But if he can get in there, maybe Geyser wins a moto with a Cairoli third or something like that, suddenly we have a brand new ball game going into the second half of this MXGP series. And Tim Geyser looks like he's shown up to play this year, which is awesome, because, you know, if you really just calculated out last year, Cairoli would have dominated if not for one Jeffrey Herlings being in the class. Cairoli had a fantastic season. He would have went like 1-1-1-1-1-1 to start the year, but Herlings went 1-1-2-1-1-1, like all over the board up there. So yeah, we have a race now, folks. This is going to get exciting. My concern still lies within Geyser crashing a lot and seemingly getting hurt more often from those crashes than he used to. But this year he's been pretty good about bouncing off the ground and has affectionately earned the name Gumby for how he can basically just slam into the ground and get right back up like it was nothing anymore. But you know, it just takes the one hard hit at the wrong angle at the right speed to end his season early, unfortunately, which has happened in the past. And we'll have to keep an eye out that doesn't happen, as he's in the midst of this epic championship battle between two world champions. Geyser, a 2-time, Cairoli, a 9-time world champion, and now about to have to deal with a 3-time world champ, or 4-time world champion, I should say, Jeffrey Herlings, coming back into the mix and making things very interesting. But moving on from those two gentlemen, as Geyser just clearly was the best rider on the weekend, I want to give a shout to Arnaud Tonus, who obviously endured some very up and down years in the USA. Had some brilliant rides where you're like, he's back, he's figured it out, Supercross is good, outdoors he's looking good, he's going to win motos, etc., etc. Just never seemed to work out with Pro Circuit Kawasaki. He just kept getting hurt, kept crashing a lot. That didn't help his case at all. And eventually they, you know, agreed to part ways, essentially, at the end of his contract. He makes the move back to Europe, ends up on the Volvo Yamaha. Last year he was with Sean Simpson. Now he is with Gauthier Paulin, and that team has stepped their game up. I feel like they definitely look like, you know, the best satellite team out there at the moment, if that's what you want to call them. They are getting factory support still, but they aren't the factory Yamaha team necessarily. And Tonus, again, on the podium. Podiumed at Agueda last week in Portugal. Podiums this past weekend in France. That's just awesome to see for a guy that has had so many ups and downs over the past couple years to hit the podium back-to-back and now honestly look kind of like his old self back to the year 2014. He even said it in a post-race podcast where he was like, this feels like he was in 2014 when he was on a 250 in Europe for CLS Kawasaki, winning motos, challenging for victories, finishing on the podium every week, being there, just not faltering and having bad races. That was kind of the hit and miss part of him at the beginning of the season. Is, yeah, he'd have a 6th or a 7th, but he'd also follow it up with a giant crash and DNF a moto, or the bike would fail, or something weird like that would happen. Now it's been 4 consistent motos, and he's in a really good spot, not only with the bike, it seems, but obviously that must help mentally to know that like all this work he's putting in isn't just for naught. He's actually been able to put in good results with the fitness level he's at and all that. So I was actually very excited to see Tonus back up on the podium again. He genuinely seems very excited about his kind of situation at the moment, and that's just good to see that a guy that was really kind of at his wit's end in the USA was able to go back to Europe and figure it out. It's kind of the inverse Osborne effect almost, but just happening maybe a little bit quicker for Tonus, it seems. So Tonus looked great. He ended up second overall, and third overall was the man I am riding as, Romain Febvre, who 2 weeks back in already looks like he kind of hasn't missed a beat. Fitness is lacking, but speed is obviously still there for the Flying Frenchman, and I thought he looked great. He just overall was, he led so much of the second moto today, or in France. Got passed by Geyser late, but I mean that was kind of as to be expected, and just kind of hovered around Tonus basically the rest of the race to take second in that second moto. Ended up third overall, but that's, I think, a good sign to see for him that he clearly isn't 100%. Fitness is down, but it wasn't like the crash ruined the speed that he had, because he had race-winning speed at Argentina before he crashed and broke his leg. And to come back and immediately be able to kind of find that again, I think is a really, really good sign that once he gets his fitness there, he's going to be right in the mix in that Cairoli Geyser battle. Even if Herlings comes back and just starts dominating the motos and we just have this world title battle going on in second place all the while, Romain Febvre can also be a spoiler in either the favor of Antonio Cairoli or Tim Geyser. It's not just like a foregone conclusion that he will just be third best every week. I think that he has all the reasons to believe he will be in that mix, and I think it showed this weekend in France to have such a good ride in that second moto. So I was very excited to see that, and look forward to seeing him progress forward from the injury recovery and land up on the top step before long. I'm sure it'll happen. Behind him, Clement Desalle just is the never-ending fourth-place man at the moment. After getting knee surgery already mid-season, to come back and just like basically go 4-4-4 in the GPs since is pretty impressive stuff. But he's just not running the pace of the leaders, and that's just heir apparent. He needs to find speed somewhere. I don't know where, but if he starts there in the lead, he usually can hang there. If he starts anywhere behind the top three, it's not just gonna it's just not gonna happen. Like, he needs to, like I said, find speed somewhere. If he finds the speed, Desalle is gonna be just as good as these guys because his consistency has been great, but the speed isn't there, and that's really been hurting him. And then fifth overall was Jeremy Seewer, who is just making it a Yamaha show up front. Gauthier Paulin was up front in the second moto quite a bit, and Paulin ended up 10th overall on the day, so he had kind of a rough day for the home race. But 4 Yamahas inside of the top 10, that's a really good sign for Yamaha, who isn't having the best of times in the USA at the moment. But in the GPs, they still seem to be rather competitive on a 450 basis. And Febvre, Tonus, Seewer, Paulin, all showing that bike is plenty capable of doing some good damage well inside of the points week in and week out in the GPs. So Cairoli ended up 7th overall after going 2:17. Again, a lot of points to make up. After having such a big lead and kind of almost tossing it all away. I have full confidence he can do it, but it definitely makes it an interesting talking point that he had such a bad race. And like, I was in shock watching it happen, because you just don't ever see that out of Tony. Like, he looked genuinely flustered the entire moto, like making rather silly mistakes. The stall itself was really weird, and then getting the bike started kind of isn't his fault necessarily, but that's what happens if you stall the bike sometimes. You get the luck of the draw where it's running a little too hot. The electric start bikes, you don't have the power of kicking it as hard as you possibly can to get it to turn over. It just has the standard turnover rate on the electric start with the solenoid and stuff like that. So I was a little surprised that, because he paused like right at the top of the hill I'm going down now. He could have pushed the bike forward and put it in gear and tried to bump start it, but then I guess he would end up at the bottom of the hill, maybe still with the bike not started. Either way, it's incidental sometimes. That's how it happens. and I think he'll probably come out swinging at the next GP and go 1-1 and just shut us all up. But for now, it's a pretty interesting talking point. 10 points between him and Geyser in the championship. All right, let us talk about the 250 division, which seemingly is getting pretty good out here. I don't know about you guys, but suddenly Jorge Prado doesn't look to be as dominant as he was in the past. Even going back to Agueda a week ago in Portugal, which I haven't highlighted much on, but you know, he went 1-1 there. He looked good, but Mitchell Evans gave him a huge run for his money in the second race there. And here, I would say Prado was not the best guy. And it was really weird in his post-race interview that he did with MX Vice, how he seemed to basically say like he wasn't worried that he wasn't the best guy because they were running basically the same lap times, although he was caught from like 5 seconds back in the first race by Jago Geerts. And Geerts was able to pick up his first ever MX2 race victory, like moto victory. And in the second race, I thought he was poised to do the same exact thing. It took him maybe a little bit too long to get around his teammate Ben Watson. But then you just saw the time start clawing down. He was 6 seconds down, then he was 5 seconds down, then he was 3.5 seconds down, and then he crashed. But, I mean, the times are coming down, and yes, maybe he was pushing the envelope, and that could be a contributing factor to you know, tucking the front wheel in a corner that caused him to go down. Still got up in second, goes 1-2 for second behind Prado's 2-1 for first. But, I mean, Prado, I felt, wasn't the guy this weekend. And I guess it does say something that he wasn't the guy, but he still won the overall. But it's making it interesting because, quite honestly, at the beginning of the year, and even once he came back from injury, it just seemed like it was going to take, you know, crashes or another injury for Prado to do anything but go 1-1. And now he just got straight up beat by a very young Belgian, you know, up-and-comer in Jago Geerts in that first race. And I know that, you know, the hard-pack rockiness of the soil that's in Saint-Jean-d'Angely wasn't maybe his favorite type of surface, but you have to be good on all surfaces to win a world title. And obviously he's a world champion for a reason, but it's cool to see that it's not just going to be him dominating all year long, and that's all we have to look forward to. Geerts was impressive, and that's cool to see him get a win. I felt he probably could have won the second one too, and I guess we'll have to see if he carries this momentum forward, because he definitely didn't carry it the last time I talked about him, which was back at Matterley? No, I forget. He finished second at another round earlier too. Regardless, good to see Geerts end up on the top step of the box in that first race and second overall on the weekend. Third was Thomas K. Olsen, who I thought was rather unimpressive most of the weekend. The biggest thing TKO has going against him right now is his starts. He is a big old boy, and that doesn't help when the 110-pound 6 kilo Jorge Prado is like the new pocket rocket, is on a very fast Red Bull KTM that seems to have their starts dialed, and then he weighs about the size of a feather, and he can pull hole shots like it's nobody's business. And Olsen is like 6 foot 100 and probably weighs above 150, I would assume. He's skinny, but he's pretty tall, so he has to weigh above 150, I'd think. Just not going to get good starts on a 250F when you're that big, I feel. It's unfortunate because I think if he can start up there, his pace looks to be pretty good. He charged through the field to get third in the first race. He got a really bad start in the second race and still was able to get fifth. So he salvaged third overall, but again, still lost 11 points to Prado in the World Championship, and now I think he's 16, 17 back or something like that. And Prado's already missed a whole GP, and this was only round 8, I think, so he needs to get starts, says Olsen, and if he doesn't turn it around soon, Prado's going to start walking with this thing. Right now, he's still kind of in a brisk jog, as he has, you know, calmed down from his sprint that turned into a run after he took the points lead, and now that the points lead is extended by another 11 points, he's kind of slowing it down. He's just got a little brisk jog going, but he's about to start walking this thing home unless Olsen can start grabbing some freaking starts, because that's the only guy right now that's even kind of close to him in the points. And yeah, Prado just looks steady as always, it seems. Mitchell Evans is quietly, I feel, the story of the year in GPs. This guy in the first 8 GPs of his career has been damn impressive. Really, really good. Fastest on the track in the first race. Clawed his way up from pretty decently far back to end up in 6th, I think it was, 6th or 7th. And then the second race, charged all the way forward again, ended up 4th. Kind of like Olsen. He's going to struggle with starts. He's a little bit on the bigger side, and he's on a Honda, which characteristically doesn't have a lot of power in the 250 division. But speed-wise, he's there. And I would say he may be one of the next guys kind of in line to grab their first overall victory, because he's looking pretty good. If he can start with those guys, I would say he might have a pretty good shot at least winning a moto here before long. And I'm stoked to see it because the Australian invasion going on around the world right now is pretty awesome. Wilson Todd lands a factory ride in the USA, riding for TLD KTM. Dean Ferris lands a factory ride in the USA, riding for Monster Energy Yamaha. Todd Waters is killing it. And then obviously you have over here the great ride out of Mitchell Evans week in and week out. It is just, it's looking pretty good for the Aussies. And we aren't too far removed from Lawrence maybe being the best 250 guy in the USA, maybe, or maybe even the world after Prado moves up. And then you have Wilson Todd, Todd Waters, Dean Ferris, Mitch Evans, a whole gamut of other guys that could ride 450s because they're maybe a little bit bigger boys that would crush it at donations, and suddenly you have very good Australian donation teams on hand for the foreseeable future. So I'm stoked for Australia to have such a good grouping of guys out there racing, and Evans is just another name in the long list of guys right now that is making Australia look damn good in this particular stage of the World Championship. So that's really cool for Evans. I'm looking forward to him winning a race because I see it happening. I see it coming. It's going to happen. I'm going to stamp it right now. Mitch Evans wins the GP before the year is over. Done deal. Put the stamp on that. That is my seal of approval given to the Aussie, number 43. All right. And P5, Adam Sterry, his best career GP finish. That's really cool to see that he was able to figure out 2 good starts. He said, again, in the MX Vice post-race interviews done by my man, Lewis Phillips. I love Lewis. He does some great work. And had the fortunes of talking to him a little bit before, as he used to play sim a little bit. But Lewis was basically asking him, how, when the gate was malfunctioning for everybody else, did you happen to get 2 good starts? And Adam basically said he was really shocked to see that nobody did it, but what he did was back all the way up to the very back of the grate, and the second the gate flinched, even if it fell slower, the second it flinched, he just dumped the clutch and just hooked it. So he would always actually get off the gate clean because he would about time it perfectly with the gate dropping so slow, and a couple other guys would have to double clutch not to hit it or because they bounced or whatever. He would just get right smooth off the gate, almost whole shot the second race. And look, I thought pretty solid all weekend. That's kind of the Sterry I've been waiting to see, because he clearly has the speed, but a lot like other guys in this class, they can't buy a start to save their freaking life. And, unfortunately for Sterry, he doesn't really have the elite speed, I feel, that can charge him all the way through the field to end up on the podium if he doesn't get the start. So couple good starts turned into a good solid day with a couple good finishes. Ends up 5th overall, and nudges out his countryman Ben Watson, who ended up 6th overall. So that is just a very, very, very brief rundown of what happened at the MXGP of France over the weekend, and playing a little bit of MXGP3 here in the process on Saint-Jean-d'Angely, where they just raced. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did, please be sure to head down in the comment section below and tell me how excited you are about this GP championship and how it's unfolding. I mean, this far into the season, I would be pretty shocked if you told me that the championships would still be within the teens of each other, even with Rowley not running away with it with no hurlings. But yeah, some interesting championship dynamics, and we'll be sure to keep an eye on it as the series moves forward. But thanks again for watching a little recap here of the MXGP of France on Start Your Systems. As always, Kellen here signing off for now, and I'll see you guys in the next one. So long for now.